sight was absolutely surreal. A gleaming white BMW was dangling from a towboat's crane, its alarm wailing like a banshee while a woman in designer yoga pants screamed from the dock below. Her voice cut through the morning air with such intensity that seagulls scattered in every direction. Neighbors poured out of their waterfront homes, phones raised, capturing what would become the most talked about incident in Riverside Cove's history. I stood at the edge of my property, coffee in hand, watching the chaos unfold with a satisfaction I tried desperately to hide. After all, that was my reserved dock space she had been illegally using for months. Let me back up and explain how we got to this point. 3 years ago, I finally achieved a lifelong dream when I purchased my first boat. It wasn't anything fancy, just a 24-feet cabin cruiser I named Second Chance, but to me it represented freedom. Along with the boat came one of the most coveted possessions in our waterfront community, a premium dock space at the Riverside Cove Marina. These spots were gold in our neighborhood with a 10-year waiting list and annual fees that would make your eyes water. The HOA managed the marina with an iron fist, enforcing rules about everything from boat size to the color of dock cleats. That's where I first encountered Karen Piton, though everyone just called her Karen, which seemed almost too perfect given her personality. She served as the HOA vice president and made it her personal mission to ensure everyone knew it. Standing 5'2" with perfectly styled blonde hair that never moved even in hurricane-force winds, she patrolled our neighborhood like a tiny dictator in Lululemon. Her husband owned several car dealerships, which explained the rotating collection of luxury vehicles in their driveway, but her favorite was that Arctic white BMW 7 Series. The trouble started on a humid Tuesday morning in June. I arrived at the marina to find Karen's BMW parked directly in front of my dock space. Not in the designated parking area 50 feet away, but right there on the narrow dock itself, blocking any possibility of me accessing my boat. I approached her politely as she was unloading shopping bags from her trunk. She looked at me over her designer sunglasses with the expression of someone who had just noticed a particularly unpleasant insect. When I explained she was blocking my dock access, she waved me off with a manicured hand and said she would only be a few minutes. Those few minutes turned into 4 hours. This pattern continued for weeks. Every few days, I would arrive to find her BMW strategically placed to cause maximum inconvenience. Sometimes it blocked my access completely. Other times, she parked so close to my boat that I could barely squeeze past without risking damage. Each confrontation followed the same script. I would ask her politely to move. She would dismiss me with increasingly creative excuses, and eventually I would have to wait or find alternative ways to access my own property. The woman had turned inconsideration into an art form. I tried going through proper channels, filing formal complaints with the HOA board. But here's where things got interesting. During the monthly board meeting, my complaint was dismissed within minutes. Karen sat there with a smug smile as the board president, her close friend Nancy Sullivan, explained that board members had certain parking privileges during official marina business. When I asked what official business required parking on the dock itself, they suddenly had to move on to other agenda items. It became crystal clear that the rules that applied to everyone else were merely suggestions for those in power. That's when I started documenting everything. Every single time her car appeared in my spot, I took time-stamped photos from multiple angles. I kept a detailed log in a notebook, recording dates, times, and duration of each violation. I even installed a small security camera on my boat that captured her vehicle's comings and goings. My wife thought I was becoming obsessed, and maybe I was, but something about the sheer arrogance of it all lit a fire in me. This wasn't just about a parking spot anymore. It was about someone believing they were above the rules that everyone else had to follow. The situation escalated when I started noticing small things going wrong with my boat. First, it was just minor annoyances like equipment moved around or dock lines retied differently. Then came the morning I discovered a fresh scratch running along the port side, right at the height where a car bumper might make contact. The security footage was inconclusive due to the angle, but the timing was suspicious. Karen's BMW had been there the previous evening, and she had clearly struggled to maneuver in the tight space she had created by parking so close. I spent hours researching our HOA bylaws and marina regulations. Buried in subsection 12.4.3, I found exactly what I was looking for. Any vehicle blocking dock access for more than 30 minutes without written authorization from the dock holder could be removed at the owner's expense. The rule was clear, specific, and most importantly, made no exceptions for board members. I had found my weapon. Now, I just needed the right moment to use it. That moment came on a perfect Saturday morning in August. I arrived at 6 a.m. to find Karen's BMW not just blocking my dock, but actually touching my boat's hull. The security camera clearly showed her pulling in the night before, misjudging the distance, and making contact with my boat before repositioning. This time, she had gone too far. I immediately called Coastal Towing, the company that had the HOA contract for marina violations. I emailed them my complete documentation file, hundreds of photos, detailed logs, and the security footage of her hitting my boat. The dispatcher was professional, but surprised. Apparently, no one had ever provided such comprehensive evidence for a towing request. He scheduled the towboat for 8 a.m., giving me just enough time to position myself for the show. I settled into a chair on my deck with fresh coffee and waited. Other neighbors must have sensed something was happening because by 7:45, small groups had gathered on nearby docks and balconies. The towboat arrived precisely at 8, its diesel engines announcing its presence long before it rounded the marina breakwater. The crew was efficient, maneuvering the specialized vessel alongside the dock where Karen's BMW sat like a beach whale. They began setting up their equipment, attaching heavy straps to the vehicle's frame with practiced precision. That's when Karen emerged from her house, left still in silk pajamas and house slippers, her face transitioning from confusion to rage in record time. What followed was a performance worthy of community theater. She screamed at the towboat operators, demanding they stop immediately. When they calmly explained they had authorization and continued their work, she tried physically blocking them, throwing herself between the crew and her car. The lead operator, a weathered man who had clearly dealt with difficult people before, simply stepped around her and continued securing the straps. Karen then pivoted to threats, promising lawsuits, job losses, and personal ruin for everyone involved. The crowd had grown considerably by this point, with at least 30 neighbors watching the spectacle unfold. Some recorded on their phones while others provided running commentary. When Karen spotted me in the crowd, her fury reached new heights. She stormed over, pointing an accusatory finger and shrieking about harassment and jealousy. I remained silent, sipping my coffee and letting her rant. Sometimes the best response is no response at all. The mechanical whir of the crane starting up cut through her tirade. We all turned to watch as the BMW began its slow ascent from the dock. The car alarm, triggered by the movement, added its own voice to the chaos. Karen ran back toward the towboat, now openly weeping and pleading with the crew. But physics and hydraulics care nothing for tears. Her luxury sedan continued rising, swaying gently in the morning breeze like the world's most expensive piñata. She made one last desperate attempt to stop the inevitable, pulling out her phone and calling what I assumed was her husband, then her lawyer, then various HOA board members. Each call grew more frantic as she realized no one could or would help her. The towboat crew, meanwhile, had successfully loaded her vehicle and was preparing to depart. The captain handed her a business card with information about retrieving her car and paying the associated fees, which I later learned totaled over $2,000. But the real consequences were yet to come. Within days, the security footage of Karen's BMW hitting my boat had been shared with law enforcement and insurance companies. She was charged with vandalism and leaving the scene of property damage. The HOA board, facing potential liability issues and overwhelming pressure from residents who had their own stories of Karen's abuse of power, called an emergency meeting. The vote to remove her from the board was unanimous, with even her former allies distancing themselves from the scandal. The legal bills mounted quickly. Between the criminal charges, the civil lawsuit I filed for the boat damage, and her own ill-advised countersuit that was immediately dismissed, Karen found herself owing over $40,000 in legal fees and damage. Her husband, mortified by the viral videos circulating on social media,